first of all, I want to start out with two little bits of housekeeping. The first is a thank you again to Cora for hosting us, to Jerry for bringing us all together, and to all of you for joining us. And of course, the panelists who I'm going to introduce, who are going to introduce themselves in a bit more detail in just a second. The second bit of housekeeping is that, as Jerry mentioned up front, we're using Slido for questions for the panel. I'm going to ask some to get the conversation started off, but we're also going to go to audience questions throughout the time with the panelists. So please do contribute to the Slido. We'll consider the first couple answered, and then ask the rest throughout the evening. So if that sounds good, we'll get started. Okay, so just to start off, Jerry gave an intro of your current roles, but we are talking about transitions and taking over new teams. I'd love to just go down the line and talk, give the brief intro and also a particularly challenging team taking over experience that you've had. We can start with Jocelyn in the end.
Well, I thought Jerry gave a pretty good rundown. I worked for a bunch of different startups right out of college, including one of my own, but had the good fortune to land at VMware in its pretty early days in 2003 as initially just as a manager of a 7-person device virtualization team. Stayed there 7 years, really grew up with the company at the VP of engineering level, and in 2010 made the jump to Facebook, where I stayed for 4 years. And I probably had, I probably changed major roles each of the 4 years I was at Facebook, but had many, many different little internal reorgs and team changes along the way. And it's hard to say what was the most challenging. I know the one Michael thinks of as the most challenging, which is that for 1 year I actually, I kind of hijacked Facebook's technical recruiting team. I took them over and had them report into engineering for a year. I returned them in good shape at the end. It was temporary, but it was good for both sides. But I don't know, I don't think that actually was the hardest one. I think the switch from VMware to Facebook was very, very difficult because I was a nincompoop in Facebook terms. Like I really knew, like VMware and Facebook were such different companies that it was not only that I lacked context, it was that the context I had was actively wrong in the Facebook context. So that was a difficult transition to make, and it was difficult to earn respect from engineers when, in some respects, I didn't deserve it yet, and I had to really grow myself before I could earn it. But I would say probably the hardest ones are when it's a really troubled team, when it's a team with low morale that comes to you in a reorg because they've been struggling. And I guess I'll refrain from naming any specific teams in the interest of not pointing a finger at anybody.
Raylene.
So, hi everyone. As Jerry mentioned, I lead the payments team at Stripe, but kind of starting a little bit before that. I actually worked at Facebook for 6 years previously. Jocelyn selling herself slightly short. She was an incredible leader there, and for a brief moment during one of her many changes, I did report into her org, which was very exciting.
You were out of newsfeed before I got there.
I think
maybe it was like a day and a half.
I think she was so many levels above that I didn't even remember. Like, it was like manager or something like that.
To save the timeline.
So on that note, at Facebook, I also actually worked on quite a range of things. So I started there as an IC out of Stanford and got my master's there. Worked on newsfeed for a while, then moved over to launch the new profile called Timeline, and then moved over to the privacy team. So I spent about 4 years working on privacy and being parts of many exciting things at Facebook, including FTC audits, site redesigns, and complete overhauls of the backend infrastructure. And from there, I went to work on content production. So I'd say one challenge at Facebook was probably one of the biggest challenges was definitely leading privacy at Facebook. It was a confluence of things. That's where I switched from being kind of an IC tech lead into being a people manager. But it was also a time of intense change for privacy at the company. This was around 2011, so there was both a lot of emphasis on how to think about privacy, how to give more controls to users, kind of in the broader regulatory ecosystem, but also internally we were literally rewriting the entire privacy stack, just from one version to another and migrating every piece of the product over to that.
just a site that's current events. This was like after Cambridge Analytica had taken all the user data and like right around when Facebook was deciding to change its stance on whether things like that were okay.
Long ago. So that was Facebook, and from there I went to Stripe. So I think at Stripe it's been a fantastic and very interesting journey. But for people who don't know, Stripe is a payments platform company, but we do a lot more than that. The mission is to increase the GDP of the internet, but to really translate the payments team that I lead, what we're trying to do is to help anyone, anywhere, transact online. The team is about 160, 170 engineers, TPMs, PMs, technical operations people. So it's quite a breadth of, we own the payments API, we work on internal controls like treasury, and our machine learning efforts to fight fraud. So it's just a wide range of things. At Stripe, really seeing the company go through a lot of change. I think when I joined it was about 200 people, and I was leading what we called the product team, which was like a flat-ish team of about 15 engineers, no product managers. So over the 3 years that I've been at Stripe, kind of seen the teams that I've led grow from 15 to over 150 people, as well as stood up and kind of built out a couple of new functions. So product management kind of helped hire in and support the first product management team at Stripe as well. So I would say, I feel like it's hard to comment on work in progress, but the journey at Stripe has been exhilarating, but very challenging as well. I think taking on not only leading and growing a huge engineering team, but also having to put on the product strategy and business strategy hat. And at our stage, we are powering solo entrepreneurs who are signing up for Stripe in Nigeria, but we're also powering Lyft and its growth internationally, and many international platforms all over the world. So that's very top of mind, and taking over new teams is an excellent topic, so I'm really glad to be on this panel. Thanks.
Thank you. Mike?
So I'm Mike Riccio. So my management career started when I was one of the founders of a gaming company called Pogo.com. And I grew up as a manager as the company grew up, which was pretty crazy. So I'm sure I was a terrible, awful manager. I know I was, actually. Coming with an engineering background, just thinking about all the things we need to do and get done. But the good thing is you're moving so fast, no one really cares. So we built that company up and wound up getting acquired by EA. And it was an interesting time because EA was trying to get into online games, which is what Pogo did, and they had basically signed a deal with AOL, I'm really dating myself now, to be the exclusive game provider for AOL. And they signed that, and in the years passing, they had nothing to show for it. So they bought us, and we became the games for AOL. And that was kind of weird because even though we were acquired, we basically took over a whole division of running that division. I was at EA for 13 years, so I did a lot of different things at EA. EA does tend to have reorganizations every year to year and a half, so lots of opportunity to take on managing new teams. I would say the most difficult one for me was there was a massive restructuring where they created a whole new top-level organization in the company, which was EA Interactive, and they're bringing together social games as well as mobile games and the web games all together because they all addressed everything that wasn't the core game. And it was me inheriting a bunch of different parts of teams that had never worked together before. And it was really about trying to figure out how to bring them together with a common sense of purpose. And on top of that, they were located all around the world. So I had teams that were everywhere from China and India and Europe and Canada, America, many different states in America. And it was just really hard to bring those all together. I think the funniest story was I didn't realize that there were these two different technical directors who really didn't get along with each other. And the first time they met in person, and we had dinner, we had some drinks, and that led to almost a brawl that had to be broken up. So that was a learning experience. After 13 years at EA, decided I wanted to do something small again, so I joined Zeus, my Zeus people is here. That's a dating company trying to bring people together to find love. And I met my wife on Match.com many years ago, so I knew that worked. And I wanted to see what I could do to help bring people together and build families as opposed to bring people together to play together. So that was a fun time. And then Google reached out to me 8 months ago and said, "Hey, Mike, you want to get back into gaming again and work on something that's unannounced and secret and brand new, and it's a startup inside Google with all the benefits and perks of Google." And I'm like, "Yeah, sign me up." So that's what I've been doing for the last 8 months. I can't say any more than that because it's super secret. If I told you, then you can only just remember it. But it's certainly been a journey that keeps going. I think the biggest wow thing for me joining Google was, came from a startup with 100-ish people. There were double that in my orientation class at Google, which happens every week, and that's just in Mountain View. So Google's scale is massive. I thought EA was a big company, but it's not.
Thank you, Krishna. All right. I'm Krishna. I head Alexa Reminders, and it's kind of an interesting thing because I took on a new team as a part of my new role as a GM for Alexa Reminders, where I'm leading now product, engineering, and everything that has to do with reminders. That includes the QA, that includes the marketing part of it, like everything that has to do with that. So it's an interesting journey, and Alexa in general, I hope everyone knows Alexa, by the way. So it's an interesting journey. The reason is because it's a voice interface, right? I mean, we all develop applications. We all look at both web, mobile, and all stuff, but voice is a very different experience altogether. Because with a customer, you don't really train them. You don't tell them what to click on. You don't tell them, okay, you go page by page, you click on this button, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Customer could say anything. And our job is to make it work. So it's an interesting journey as a whole, and things are going well. So now going back, I started management like everyone else, I guess, because my manager came up to me and said, "Hey, I need help. I'm short of managers. I need you to manage a team." I was like, "Okay, that's how okay. All right, I'll get into management. I'll start doing it." And I didn't do a great job either. Everyone, I think, knows from that experience, but it did help me become a better manager through that experience. And then I moved on to Yelp, and I took on a team which was very focused on, it was actually 3 engineers at that time, focusing on data and all internal stuff to help drive revenue, that is sell more ads on Yelp. It started off fairly small. That's when Yelp just went public, and we were growing as an engineering team. And by the time I kind of took that team, it was 3, and we grew to 25 plus. We had to break it down into several. We did a lot of other things, not just the data related and ads related. We took on quite a lot of things. And when I was at Yale, Ticketfly, it's not acquired by Eventbrite, it's a ticketing company, reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're interested in improving revenue. Would you like to help us figure out how we could do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Sounds good." So that's where I went on to Ticketfly. It's a very small company. There was just one engineer that I was given and told, "Okay, you got to work it out." And it went well. We did a lot of new things. Then Eventbrite acquired us, and again, I took on the new teams again there, right? And actually, I was tasked to build a new team altogether because we were looking at recommendations. We were looking at how can we use data to help event organizers to put together an event so that we can actually tell them, you know what, do an event on Sunday night. You actually do a better revenue during that time rather than doing on a Saturday or a Friday. So those kind of interesting stuff that we were looking at data, machine learning, and all that stuff. So it's a new team that I took on, and there were quite a few challenges in there because, first of all, the company itself wasn't convinced if we wanted to do that because ticketing world, the way you think, it's not fully technology driven. It's not a data driven thing. It's a very manual thing. Just buying a ticket is what is important from a technology perspective. It's not how you drive the ticket or how you improve the overall experience. It's not fully data-driven yet, right? And it's not because if the company doesn't want to do it, but ticketing in general is like that. And it's hard to convince, and it takes a lot of time to ensure that, okay, now I have to put together a vision, I have to build the right team, not just to convince the people I'm hiring, but also my CEO and others, so that, okay, they are convinced that this is the right plan, this is what the company needs. So it was an interesting experience. I had to convince a lot of things and take on new teams, and I also convinced the teams that, okay, this is the right job for you. So overall, I think those, if you put together, I've kind of taken on a lot of teams, just because the companies have grown big. I've had the opportunity to be at the right place at the right time, where the companies have grown, new teams got added, I had the liberty to try out new things. All this together, I think this topic is fairly something that I have a good experience with, so I hope to share some good stories. Hopefully that'll help you all.
All right, so we're going to dive in a little bit deeper, but while we do that, just another plug for the Slido. There are a lot of great questions already rolling in. Please upvote them so that we are answering the ones that are most interesting to the group here. So just to go a bit deeper, how do you all approach getting to know and developing context in an environment where you are brand new? What do you do in your first day, week, month, quarter? And let's start with Raylene.
So I think it really depends on the goal that you are kind of stepping into, obviously. I think the biggest thing I think about is how do you learn through a pretty dynamic way. So how do you get to know the people and through them understand the problems that are on the ground. So one example is when I started leading payments at Stripe, there was a very, very wide breadth of things I needed to learn. Everything from the current state of our top users, how happy were they with the product, what did the sales pipeline look like, to the actual technical complexities in our payments platform. Where were the systems that people felt we most needed to replace or improve? And of course, there were just like day-to-day challenges that engineers on the teams were facing. And so what I did in the first roughly 30 to 60 days was a lot of talking to people. And I actually set up different forms of kind of these like self-bootcamp projects to get at these topics. So one example is we kind of did a self-starting payments bootcamp where I and a few others interviewed over 20 different employees at the company from sales, partnerships, legal, compliance, engineering, product. We just sat them down and we said, hey, tell us what is your focus at the company? What do you think our users most like and hate about our product? And what do you think, talking to me, leading payments, what do you think I should be most focused on? And it was incredibly helpful. It kind of touches on some of the things Leigh described about not only getting to know the people and building horizontal relationships, but trying to build depth in the area you're focused on. So that was incredibly helpful. We produced 50 pages of notes, and even today, I'll often point new hires at it and say, hey, go read up on this and get a quick start guide. The other thing that I did, because I think in the end, the vast number of people in payments are engineers, and you really want to understand what their day-to-day looks like. So I had heard from talking to some engineers and asking them, how do you spend your time? What do you want us to improve? I had heard that their weekly sort of on-call rotation was really painful, had a lot of toil, just a difficult challenge for them. So as a result, I sat by one of our longer tenured engineers for throughout a week and just sat by him and I said, show me what you're doing on this on-call rotation. And he would pull open individual tickets, we'd look at them together, I'd say, tell me, walk me through what you're doing when you're trying to debug this in the code. And I just spent a couple days doing that with him. And again, that helped me really build sort of first-hand knowledge of what people were doing on the team. So just a few examples. So I think, talk to people, try to build some depth of knowledge, either just through direct experience or hearing things from the market or from the users. I also talk directly to some users as well and join user meetings. And yeah, I think that's kind of the most important thing to do early on.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, it's similar. So I like to think about it along 3 axes. So we've got people, processes, and technology. I'm an engineer by trade, so technology kind of comes the easiest. just trying to dive in and understand it, as you talked about. I have a similar story where I sat down with a marketing person and understood what they were going through, and that really enlightened our strategy for how to develop better products to support them. And they know that I have their best interests in mind and in heart, and we're doing this together. We're kind of rolling out these changes together. Change is hard. You have to manage a change. You have to communicate it in advance. You have to tell people, because everybody wants to know, how does it impact me? Right? I get that this is how it all makes sense for the organization as a whole, but how does this impact me? That's what every individual wants to know, and you have to have a meaningful answer to that question for them, and then you can move forward from there.
So you talked about building trust, and Leigh spoke about securing early wins as a mechanism for building trust and credibility. How do y'all approach that process of earning people's trust and credibility? Start with Jocelyn.
I think you've got to create some value for them, like to the point about win. And one of the best ways you can create value for a team is help the team get a win on the court. I think one mistake, I think that's pretty natural. It's probably pretty obvious to most of you that you can build trust. I mean, certainly by having one-on-ones, by showing authentic interest, by really coming to understand people, by showing that you care, but like ultimately to kind of rally a team in the right direction, it's not about having a beer with someone, it's about being together in the trenches. It's about them knowing they can rely on you. And I think that the empty calories of that are to try to get clicks for your team, like to upgrade the office or to get them a good bonus, like. And I won't say that those things at best are band-aids. Like it's a hack to buy time and space. But real trust comes from like marshaling the team to accomplish something. And in the short term, it can just be getting something they need. It can be getting them unlocked. It can be getting that team that's you've been waiting and waiting for to finally give you an engineer so that you can get moving again. Or it can be getting your headcount. Or it can be even like just taking upon yourself some of the grungy, dirty work, like doing the on-call rotation that everybody dreads, or making time in the roadmap to do code cleanup. So it's making people feel like it's showing them some tangible evidence that their working goals will be met thanks to you.
Krishna, what do you think? How you build trust?
I think those are pretty good things where you could actually do something for the team rather than just talk about, okay, this is how you could do, this is how you should do, rather just help them in the whole process. And more importantly, I think there's no one size fits all because you have a very diverse team. You need to have a diversity. If you have the same kind of team where everyone says yes to you, you probably should look at it and say, okay, do you have the right team in the first place? But the whole point is there's no one size fits all. You got to work with them. You need to understand, okay, what is important for this person? How do I make sure that I build that relationship? Because trust and relationship kind of go together. It is important that you build a relationship with that person, and that can only happen when that person can trust you. And the other way, you need to trust them too. So show tangible things, right? Like unblock them and work with them or work alongside, actually. Whether that's a code commit, whether that is a CR, whatever it is that they're doing, you need to make them feel that, okay, you understand what they're doing, right? It's so easy for us to get lost in the meetings, in the high-level discussions, in putting out a strategy, and also if you come from an engineering background, you're so inclined to come up with a design too, sometimes just to show that, okay, you're the smartest person in the room. I don't think you need to be that person. Sure, that helps, but I don't think you need to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to make sure that you're asking the right questions, you're helping them, you're actually making them feel that, okay, whatever they're doing is valuable. The other important thing is the way you build trust is also by sharing information. By the nature of your role, you have access to more information than they do. And it is important that you connect the dots so that they know that every code commit that they're making, there is value to it, right? There is an end customer who actually looks at it, uses it, and experiences it. So it is important that they see value in it. And as a leader, it's your job to connect those dots. And when you do that, they trust you. They feel like, okay, you're willing to share more information. And you're willing to actually add value to the whole work that they're doing, right? So all these together, again, there's no one size fits all. I think you need to first understand what drives that person and try to adapt your approach towards that.
So let's shift to a question from the audience. Open to anybody on the panel. I really am excited for this one. It looks like a fantastic question. How do you
theme?
we're just some problem solving. How do you deal with it when you inherit a mess, a team with wrong skill sets, low morale, etc.? Open to anyone.
I've experienced this many times. I mean, first of all, it's like saying, how do you deal with it when you're assigned a bug? Like, different bugs are different, right, and have different solutions. And a bad team, you know, many things could be the root cause, right? It could be that they're just not resourced well enough. It could be that they've had bad leadership, and like maybe you can just come in and straighten things out. But the one thing that I can say about this that's not hopelessly generic is, and sometimes like a team may be deeply flawed, but the individuals in the team are very salvageable, right? And it's a question of, like, it's not that important to make the team succeed. It is very important to help the individual succeed and to make sure the goals of the team get met somehow. And so, like, if you have an injured team and you can heal that injury, great, do it. Like, debug it, solve it, we're all problem solvers. But one thing not to overlook is, if a team is fundamentally flawed, like is fundamentally assigned duties that are impossible to achieve, or has just such low morale from a succession of failures, like you've dug such a deep hole, you can't even attract help because nobody wants to join this team, its name is a blight. Rework that team out of existence. If the team does not have the skill set to accomplish its goals, send the goals to another team that does have the skill set to accomplish it. And make sure each member of the team goes to a place where they can be happy and repatriate. Like, some problems it's just too expensive to fix, to turn around. Like, start over. Things like.
Anyone else?
By the way, so that's one of the hardest solutions for managers to arrive at, because like every other member of the team can kind of, there's a role for them somewhere else. Like, every team is trying to add engineers, but like as the manager of the team, like that's your whole job. And so what I'm saying to you is delete your job, not anybody else's. But I think you know, the faith you have to have is that if you solve this problem well, there's going to be another job for you.
Any particular messes that you've inherited and how you approach the problem?
I wouldn't say it's a mess that I inherited, but it's just that the charter of the team changed when I kind of joined. It actually made the skill set a little bit useless with the new charter, I guess. So it's important that you need to understand actually if do you have the right team, is the right charter, and if so, basically they're just at the wrong place. You just have to make sure that you see, okay, is there a different place that they can be, and if they want to actually be part of this and learn and actually get better at the new charter, right? So the way I approached it is I actually spoke to everyone on the team, and thankfully the team was small at that time. So I was able to actually do that and tell them, hey, this is what we're doing right now, right? Our initial plan actually, before I joined, was a totally different thing. And this is A, this is B. Are you interested in doing this? If so, know that there's going to be a steep ramp up. And just be open about it. There's no point in hiding details, right? You just have to be open about it. Okay, this is what we're doing, this is what the company believes is the right approach, and this is what I believe is the right approach, so this is the direction that we're going, and you can join in, but the only thing is that there will be a steep ramp up. And you have to be aware of it. If you're not interested, we'll find something else for you to do because we still value, and I'm hoping the situation I was in is that the engineers were solid. So it is important that we find a place for them and make it work. And it was kind of an easy thing because I wasn't inheriting a mess, it was more of a change in direction for me, so it was easy for me to kind of walk through that details and talk to them and explain them actually how we're going to handle this. And be open about it is what I would say.
How about cultural shifts or cultural challenges? Are there times where you've encountered a cultural challenge that's inhibited what you think the team needs to be able to accomplish?
I guess it's enough years in the rearview mirror. I can talk about one of Facebook's many pivots to mobile. It's probably early 2013, via reorg again, transferred from another part of the org. I took over Facebook's centralized mobile engineering team. And this was a time when mobile was visibly the future of the company, when we were talking about being mobile first. We had already tried and failed with HTML5 to just take all the code we had on web and bring it to mobile. And we had buckled down and acknowledged to ourselves that we were going to have to really build native apps for all the platforms. And the way Facebook's product org, the engineering org that made the products was traditionally structured was by area. So we talked about the newsfeed team, the profile team, the messenger team. And initially, in Facebook's history when I joined in 2010, those teams were all building for the web platform, and then there were like a handful of guys doing mobile who were trying to take every single feature built by like 200 web engineers and port that to iOS, and I won't even tell you what we did on Android, it's too embarrassing. And so fast forward to 2013, we're mobile first, we tried HTML5, that didn't work, so now we're just like seriously cranking to try to get, and every single product team is now only able to achieve their goals if they ship a lot of features on mobile, because the goals of a product team are things like user engagement. The photos team would have a goal about how many photos got uploaded. And so to achieve your goals with the preponderance of the user base and the highly engaged user base shifting to mobile, it was just way more important to ship features on mobile than on web. And so the product teams did not want to sit around and wait for a centralized mobile team to implement features for them. They had acquired their own mobile engineers, and they were building their own mobile functionality. But this was a time when we didn't have a lot of highly trained iOS and Android engineers in the company, and the bulk of them were still sitting in that centralized mobile engineering organization and acting as kind of gatekeepers on the mobile code base. And there was a major culture clash because the product teams featured a lot of people who were long-timers at Facebook, who really cut their teeth on the classic lamp stack, iterative, A/B test your way, very incremental, very agile. And we shipped every day of the week. I mean, there was a ship vehicle every day of the week. Whereas the mobile team, the people who had deep history building for iOS and Android, because Facebook didn't have any of those people, or hardly any in 2010, like those were mostly outsiders who arrived at the company. We recruited them from places like Apple and Mozilla. They were experts in shipping native apps. But their view was, well, we know how to do mobile, and it's this Apple way, or it's this Mozilla way, and it involves, specs and design and feature freeze and code freeze and QA and all these concepts that, not only did not exist at Facebook proper, in Facebook history, but were viewed as kind of culturally antithetical. And so, it was not the case that there was a debate going on about what's the right release process. Or it kind of should have been a debate about the right release process, but what instead was happening was a debate about culture, you people are actively evil and have the wrong culture, on both sides, right? The mobile people being you people are crazy, you want to put diffs into the, it was an 8-week release process, where you could code for 4 weeks and then you're just supposed to test and fix small bugs for 4 weeks. And of course the product teams, with the web, old Facebook culture wanted to adding features right up until the day before it shipped, and this was total heresy to people who were used to shipping native software. And whereas meanwhile, and Raylene lived through this change, so just laugh along. And whereas meanwhile, the Facebook people are who are these clowns? They don't understand anything about Facebook. We're different. We're Facebook. We're exceptional. We don't do things like those old pokey companies that you come from. And so I had spent 7 years shipping operating systems at VMware before I got to Facebook, but I'd had a good 2 or 3 years shipping for the web, the Facebook way, and I had my own, as I alerted you, it was a huge culture shift and release process. Everything I thought I knew the laws of physics, but it turned out I just knew the law of gravity, and I moved from the Earth to Mars, and it changed. And so I kind of processed all that over 2 years. And so I was kind of one of the few people standing in the engineering leadership team who could sort of see the point that the way Facebook was used to doing things was fundamentally enabled by the LAMP stack, and the fact that all our code ran on our own servers, and we could update it every day, actually twice a day most days, and if we, God forbid, we ship something really terrible, we could ship a hotfix. As opposed to mobile, where you just can't. And even if you want to ship a hotfix, you're waiting 3 days for Apple to approve it, at best case. But likewise, the folks coming out of Apple just sort of have this attitude of, oh, well, you Facebook people are wrong and you don't know what you're doing, as opposed to no, there's going to be a Facebook way to do mobile, and it's probably not going to look like Apple because we're not shipping hardware and we're not releasing once a year. It is a train model, it is 4-week cycles, it's going to be iterative in some way, and we've got to enable that. So that culture shift was really hard because by the time I walked into the organization, people were really dug in and entrenched and had lost a lot of respect and trust for one another and compatibility with one another in terms of technical respect, right? They didn't conceive of the conversation they were having as a culture or a values conversation. So it was just like, well, you're wrong, and maybe even like you're a threat to, you know, the values of the company and the identity of the company. I don't think I'm overstating it. You go through it. And so that was hard. And what I did was sort of find a few bridges. Like there were a few engineers in the product team that the mobile team respected, and like try to nurture those. And I kind of quietly tried to encourage members of the mobile engineering team actually to transfer into the product teams. So then, like, you might say, like, ooh, that messenger team, I don't trust them at all. But oh, of course I trust, Tom. Like he sat next to me up until 10 minutes ago. So I trust him, and so I'm gonna accept his code review as safe. And so just kind of weaving those things together, getting some mutual wins on the board. There were some cases where product teams had disasters and the mobile team was able to ride to the rescue. It was in some ways harder to build respect in the other direction. But it was also like getting the product teams to take some ownership for some of the things they hadn't before then. Things like crashes and performance, and there was a real culture at Facebook of just autonomy. Like if every team goes off and does their own thing. And that's enabled by an architecture of the web in which every product owns their own endpoint. And if I screw up the photo uploader, that doesn't harm Messenger and vice versa. Whereas in mobile, we're all sitting in the same payload and we really can hurt each other. And so there does need to be, there's a tragedy of the commons unless everybody comes in and starts doing some cleanup. So I ran around to every product team and got them to start doing their share of the cleanup that had all been falling on the mobile eng team. So it was like getting some small wins on the board. It was getting people to gradually build trust and the feeling that they could rely on each other. And then, my end game after about a year of this actually was exactly what I said for the last question, which is I reorged the mobile engineering team out of existence. I said, look, like if we're a mobile first company, we don't have a mobile team. When Facebook was web first, we didn't have a web team. We had a newsfeed team. We had a messenger team. And those were all web. And so if we're truly mobile first, then we can have a mobile infrastructure team. We had a product, we can have people who build frameworks. That we can have a build release team, but we should not have a mobile team. And there were a few last pieces of the app, like the navigation bar and so on, that I think we gave that to the newsfeed team. I'm trying to remember now, it's many years ago. But reorging it out of existence was sort of the last act. And then, there were probably still pockets of dissent and conflict, but there was no longer like a personified entity where you could say, well, that group is out to get us, or that group are being gatekeepers. Like, they just weren't there.
So there's a very distinct theme to the three questions that are up on the board, and it is really your relationship with your new direct reports. And also performance. So just starting with the first one up here, how much time would you typically give to a low performer to recover or let go? And I think more generally, like how do you approach evaluating the performance of your new reports who you were really getting to know for the first time? Mike?
Well, even if they're new reports, they have a history, right? So you gotta understand the history of how they've been performing over time. The first thing you want to make sure is this is not a surprise to that person. You don't want like some performance improvement plan, some official action to be the first time they hear that there's a problem. You really need to have that performance conversation with them on a regular basis, not just waiting for an annual performance review or a quarterly performance review or whatever processes your company uses. And then, how much time do you give them to respond? Well, it's different. I've used different ones in different companies based on the frameworks that the companies had in place. Some companies are very conservative and want to go through a very formalized, well-documented plan with multiple steps that you have to go through until you reach a point where if they can't recover with all the help and support that you give them as a manager, as well as all the support they get from the rest of the organization, then you have to part ways, and that's a sad ending. In other companies that were small startups or whatever, it's a lot looser generally, and you have a lot more flexibility on what you want to do with your HR partner. So when I've been in startup situations, it's really, you have the conversation with the employee, you work with them. If 30 days you still are not even aligned on them seeing what the problem is and trying to work towards it, you're not making any headway on that, it's really time to institute whatever formalized steps it would take to get them out, which could be just right then and there, or it could be going through some formal documented process. So that's my take on that.
Any other takes?
I agree with all that. I think one thing, just to add, is I do think cases are very different, and there's a lot of nuance, in fact, in kind of the level of experience, capabilities of the person. So I think something we look at is, there's like different stages of a career. So often when you think of like a more new grad engineer, something more early, I think you do tend to like squeeze the time horizons a bit more, just because you're looking for active growth and responding to feedback, and sort of even the work that they're doing is a very tight cycle. Like it might be a week-long feature, a few days on a feature. So you can tune your performance management to that level. Often if you're working with someone who's very, very experienced, so let's say like a specialist in the industry, one rule of thumb we used to say is give them 1 month to spin up for every year they worked at their last company. So if someone joined the company from 12 years at a hardware company, it might be like a year before you're really seeing the true potential of that person. So I do think it's quite nuanced in terms of how much time you really give, and really what is low performance, because I think low performance for a 10, 12-year veteran is quite different than low performance for a new grad who just joins your team after a summer off after college. The other thing too is something I learned kind of the hard way is you do underestimate the effect it might have on other people on the team. So there have been cases where I've had a mid-career person who actually, even though low performance, the output was still pretty good. Like they're kind of contributing to the roadmap, they're getting a lot done. But there were a lot of personality clashes and just very negative, there's like a very negative feeling on the team around this person. And we actually started doing the more structured HR process. So here are your goals, you're going to complete them, and this person was actually knocking them out of the park, because they're very capable in terms of just coding and getting a lot of things done. And so we were nearing the end of the PIP, and it really started to look like this person was going to pass it. And as we were talking to people on the team, it just became clear that even if this person was really productive in finishing all their features on time, the team perceived their presence as like a drag on their productivity and happiness. And so in the end, we had to kind of pivot the structure of the PIP, and ended up having like very tough conversations around working with the team collaboration, and the person ended up exiting sooner than we had allotted for in like the HR process. So I think often sometimes you do have to kind of go at it harder than you might think if there is like a blast radius surrounding the person.
I do want to tie to that third question because it's our look up rearranged. It was up there and it's not there anymore, which is about motivation, right? And how do you motivate somebody? Because a lot of times low performance is an indication of somebody's motivations aren't aligned with what you need for the organization. And if you think about it, like you plot it like a vector on a graph, right? Somebody's motivation is, they're really energized doing this, but you need them to go this way for the organization. So I try to find ways to get those arrows to align as much as possible, like divvying up responsibilities between different people if necessary, or just finding them, maybe they just need to find another role in some other team where they are going to be a lot more productive. Other times it really is just a skill set, which is more often typical with hiring a new person, bringing them into the team and realizing that, even though you thought they had this set of skills in the interviews, it turns out when you apply in real life, they don't, and in that case it's a lot more cut and dry.
I think one thing is you need to time box all these activities, right? It is important that at the end of the day, you want to see that individual being successful, whether inside or outside the organization. So it is important that you time box it so that you don't delay the entire process. Like before you start a bit, I've seen some people delay it because they think that they'll turn around, they'll do a better work. But I think it's important that you communicate with them regularly and actually put a plan in place before you actually get to the PIP and see if you really need a PIP, if you need a PIP, time boxing. Because you're not doing yourself any favor or that person any favor by just dragging it along, right? Because you're not just going to impact the team's morale, you're going to impact the person because clearly the person might be in the wrong job. It's nothing to do with that individual, it's just that it is the wrong job. So by actually ripping the band-aid, you probably will help them go to a role that they like and they're aligned with. So the only thing is just time box those things.
I want to inject one super practical note just to connect it to this topic. Like, all this is super good advice, and a lot of it's applicable anytime you're firing someone. But the situation where you walk in, you're handed a team, and they're like, and by the way, your first job is to hire that guy. To fire that guy. sometimes the whole team is just loathing this person and getting rid of them buys you points. But most of the time that you fire someone, it's not awesome for the rest of the team. Like even if they recognize the person is mediocre, it's always scary. People also always think first about how does this affect me? Does this mean my job's at risk? Does it mean I'm vulnerable? You know, and if the person was like maybe, you know, haphazard in their work or flaky but was really well liked, then often it's like shocking and disappointing. And so when you as the manager fire that person, it costs you a lot of social capital. And as a new manager, you don't have much of that yet. And so with like all due respect to like the need for speed, and you should always fire as quickly as humanly possible. Like as a brand new manager of this person that you've been told to fire, like the two considerations that are on the delay side of the scales, one is you have to be able to own it. You can never fire someone because somebody else told you to fire them. So you have to observe them long enough and give them feedback long enough and see them respond to it long enough to believe for yourself that you can own the firing decision. But second, very super pragmatically, in your 30, 60, 90-day plan, you've got to get enough points on the board, enough trust and credibility with the team that the rest of them are going to feel safe with you and not flip out when you fire this person. And that's worth an extra month if that's what it costs.
So we've had a lot of change and dynamic reordering up here. This one at the top sort of rocketed to the top just a second ago, so it seems like it's on people's minds. You inherited a heavily understaffed team and the execs do not budge. What do you do?
Okay, so there's two cases in which this scenario can come to pass. One is your execs do not actually trust you. They don't believe you when you say it needs more resources. And maybe that's because engineering has lied to them in the past or they're not technical, but for whatever reason, they don't believe you. The other option is they believe you, they just have no choice, the resources don't exist. You're a Series A startup, you have 2 months of burn left, there are no more resources and there is no more time. So your job is to figure out which of those situations you're in. And if you're in the execs have no choice, then you've got to decide, all right, am I going to try to pull off a miracle, do the death march, like make the best of this situation, you know, and sprint and give up my nights and weekends because it's worth it. And in that case, your job is to go rally the team and try to pull off a miracle. And if you don't want to do that, then you can quit, right? Like those are your two legit ethical choices, because otherwise you're just complicit. You're just complicit, and you're just lying to the exec team and the investors if you tell them it's possible and it's not. The other possibility, and 80% of the time this is the case you're in, is the execs don't believe you. And so then we've been talking a lot about how do you earn trust with the engineers, with the team who works for you. Another part of your job as you change jobs is how do you get credibility with the execs? How do you get them to believe you? Well, it turns out some of the same tools work. One is you've got to get some points on the board. You've got to show the execs that you're a manager of your word, that you say you're going to deliver something and then you do it. Another way to work with execs who maybe don't believe you just because they're not technical. They don't have the skill set with which to understand what you're saying, is not to present them with one choice of, that's impossible, we need more time, but give them multiple choices. Right, so they say, you know, well, you need to ship this product by September 1st. You can go back and say, well, I can give you half the feature set by September 1st, or I can give you all the features by October 15th, or I can give you, you know, some blended version. Or if you gave me 3 more engineers, so give them a menu. And all of a sudden, then they can feel effective. Then they can feel like they're making decisions and they're exercising their judgment as opposed to relying on yours. But don't put them in a box. Don't say you have only one choice, which is not a choice they want to hear. Once they're focused on choosing between the 4 choices you've given them, as opposed to just sort of rejecting the choice they tried to give you, then you and they are working on the same side, which is to figure out what's possible. But to have that conversation productively, they first have to actually just not think that you're a lying engineer who always wants more time.
Variation of the first point, because I think it reduces down to kind of the same idea, but I think the way to phrase it, you're not looking at the same information that they're looking at, is the way I think about that. So it maybe boils down to they don't believe what you're saying, but the other way to look at it is like, they don't maybe see what you're seeing. So a couple things, and the other thing that's funny about this question is I'm sure all of you feel understaffed. You know, do you ever have a team where it's like, I have so much spare engineering capacity, it's like, give me twice as much responsibility, no new headcount. So I'm sure all of you go through this. A few things that come to mind, you know, I think, at Stripe, I think we actually have a lot of almost like a mixture of these things. We have a lot of feature requests because the business and our user base is growing at a tremendous rate. We don't want to be like quadrupling the engineering team in 1 year, so there's some natural limitations to how fast we're able to grow. And as we grow, the information gets sparser and like harder to really consolidate. So a couple things, I've done. I think one is like you do want to know your own team as best as you possibly can. So when you're saying it's understaffed, what is the team doing? Like build your own knowledge base. So like, okay, well we're spending 10% of our time fixing bugs. That incident last week cost us 100 hours to recover from. There's a lot of power in just like knowing yourself what the team is doing. There's kind of acting first as well. So before you sort of present the menu of options, which you ultimately agree that's kind of what you need to do, you almost want to like evaluate your own potential like, emergency plans. So you might examine and say, well, electively, maybe we should deprioritize this first to kind of really constrain the problem space. And then I think there's some round of communication, even before presenting options, of getting more feedback, like which of these do you think is the most important? Or there are 5 things that we could be doing. Previously we had heard that these 3 are the most important, but now we're hearing that number 5 is really important. Do you want me to do number 5 at the cost of doing number 1, 2, and 3? And there's kind of just this ongoing dialogue back and forth. The other thing, if you have a sort of larger team, do you think you can decide how to allocate the portfolio within your purview, right? So sometimes do you solve your own problem? You say, I know I have this other team over there. They're working on important things, everybody is, but they're working on maybe less urgent important things, and is there a way where I proactively say, all right, you two, just form a virtual team this half, we're gonna knock out the goals. And I think naturally it's easier to do that when you have a bit of a bigger team, and there's kind of a mix of responsibilities that you carry.
Cool, so we're just about out of time. I'm going to throw out 2 quick lightning round questions. So the first is, if you had to choose one book, framework, other resource on this subject, on the subject of taking over a new team, what would it be? Anyone can start. We'll go to everybody.
I'm just going to go with a topic instead of a specific title of book, because I don't remember it. That's my only excuse. Situational leadership. There are no canned answers. Everything is very situational, and you need to understand the situation you're in, and that applies to you and the other people around you. A lot of it applies to how to manage people. We kind of alluded to it with new people in a new role are very different than experienced people, and how you have to deal with those situations. So look up situational leadership. There's a lot of good books. I just can't remember the names right now.
Big fan. Christian?
I can't remember a book name, but the topic is like trust, for sure. I think building trust, and I think leadership with I think a big part of the leadership is not just the trust part. Along with that is building relationship. I think those 2 topics I think will hugely help no matter what situation you are in, because those things will really help you either figure out the situation or help resolve that situation altogether.
Jocelyn?
I don't think it's specific to this topic, but the number 1 book I give every engineer who is transitioning into management is called Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. It's under actually, or sometimes it's called Influence. He wrote, it's the same book. Cialdini, C-I-A-L-D-I-N-I. And it is all about sort of human psychology and how we believe, and the ways in which humans are predictably not rational. And sort of ultimately, one of the key things we have to do with managers is connect with people, win their trust, and align them towards achieving a goal. And this book equips you with a lot of powerful tools for doing that, and also for understanding why your well-meant engineering attempts to motivate people with rationality are sometimes failing.
Raylene?
As a disclaimer, I'm really bad at reading like management psychology books. I just don't really. I maybe should, so I'm going to read all 3 of these books that you guys suggested. So one suggestion, one of my favorite books I've read in the last couple of years is called Thinking in Systems. Just to go very nerdy, the book is by this woman called Donella Meadows, and it's all about how do you think about the world and the things you work on, the people around you, using the concept of systems. So this is the idea that you think you have an input, you have an output, you have limited resources, you have different constraints, and how do they all relate to achieving the goals that you're after, or even just understanding the world around you. I think management is very much like a systems thinking role. Like we've all said this, there's no size fits all, or no size fits all, and how things are really dependent on the situation and dependent on the circumstance. And I think landing in a new team, a lot of it is just diagnosis, like what is happening, what are the constraints, what do people need, and kind of using that knowledge of systems to sort of enact and affect change.
And I'm going to throw in another plug for the first 90 days, which Leigh mentioned. Really, if you find yourself taking on a new team, it has a lot of really valuable themes and tactics that apply to a lot of different situations. Last question, promise. Who here among panelists is hiring engineering managers? So if you find yourself interested in working with one of these great, insightful leaders, they'll be here. Come talk to them. Thanks, everybody. Thank you to the panelists.